Let's go now to Brussels, where TRT World's John Brain is standing by for us. John, the EU has now had a few hours to process the news. Are they still in shock?
Yes, very much so. I think, although, of course, it knew this was a possibility, the reality of it is just now sinking in. And it has been a huge shock to everyone here in Brussels, I think. Not everyone is dismayed by the outcome. We've spoken to some MEPs who are very pleased indeed. Let's turn now to Sir Graham Watson, a former MEP, who now sits on, which committee is it?
The European Economic and Social Committee. It's an advisory body to the Union.
What's your reaction to this vote?
I think this is a terrible day for the United Kingdom and for its influence in the world, and certainly not a good day for the European Union. Clearly, the people have spoken. We live in a democracy and their will must be respected. But we know too that 2/3 of the members of the British Parliament do not want Britain to leave the European Union. And maybe the logical outcome of this is a new general election in the United Kingdom and leaving it to the new government to decide how to proceed.
But your statement there, isn't that summing up everything that's wrong with Brussels, that people see this disconnect between the establishment and ordinary citizens, that you're saying, actually, let's ignore the vote they've just had?
I'm not saying that at all. And I think had Britain voted uniformly, 53% to leave, 47% to stay, or whatever the final figures were, one could reasonably say this is the settled will of the British people. But Britain didn't vote that way. In Scotland, 70% in many communities voted to stay. In Northern Ireland, even more. In Gibraltar, some 90% of the people voted to stay in the European Union. So there is a disconnect within the United Kingdom, which, should the logic of the vote be carried through and the UK leaves the European Union, could lead to the dismemberment of the United Kingdom itself.
That's fairly dramatic stuff, and of course we've heard Donald Tusk talk about the demise of Western civilization. Aren't all you supporters of the EU getting a little bit carried away?
Well, in politics, one always has a tendency to get carried away. But, you know, we are the day after. The vote has happened. Dover and Calais are still 22 miles apart. Overnight, very little will change, other than, of course, the dramatic fall in the value of the pound sterling. But over time, we will see less investment in the United Kingdom, fewer jobs in the United Kingdom, and we'll see Britain's influence decline. And I'm not sure that the British people have really voted for that. I think what they have done is expressed outrage at some of the policies of their government, at the way in which they feel left behind in globalization, the way in which they feel unconsulted, and a government has to take that into account.
I'm curious that you say they've expressed dismay at their own government. Surely it's the government here in Brussels that they're objecting to.
Well, there are many things that one could object to in Brussels. There are many reforms that Britain has always sought in the European Union. In my time as a member of the European Parliament, I was campaigning for those reforms. But it must then be up to people to propose alternatives. And the problem in Britain has been this idea that you can have a British Europe. You will never have a British Europe any more than you will have a French Europe or a German Europe or an Italian Europe. You can only have a European Europe. It's a process of compromise. And if people are not prepared to live with that compromise and that process of compromise, then it is probably better that they are out. And I think that's one of the reasons why some MEPs have said, we breathe a sigh of relief. An awkward member of our club has decided to leave.
It may be an awkward member, but it does represent views of many other people. Is there not a danger now of the EU ignoring this warning signal and ploughing on as before and alienating more people?
Well, that's certainly, of course, a danger. But I think the problems that we have in the European Union are at least as much to do with the attitudes of national government as they are of European government. There are many things we could reform here. This place should be far more open, far more transparent, far more concerned about how it spends taxpayers' money. Those messages, I think, have been heard, not only in this referendum, but in others. But there is a major discussion needed about whether Europe hangs together because one of the outcomes of this vote will be the encouragement of nationalists and anti-Europeans in other countries.
You've said you fear for the future of the UK. Do you fear for the future of Europe after this vote?
I do indeed. I think that we have seen a step introducing greater uncertainty in a situation which is already fragile. Europe was born of crisis, it has overcome previous crises, and I believe it can overcome this one. But I hope that the United Kingdom will reflect on whether it really wishes not to be part of the solution.
Sir Graham, thank you very much indeed. Well, certainly for the time being at least, the UK has decided it doesn't want to be part of the solution. We'll have to see how things pan out in the weeks, months and possibly years to come to see the new relationship between Britain and the EU. Back to you.